Isn't that just the? It's your phone that's dictated. Yes.
Good evening. I'd like to welcome you to the August 17, 2021 meeting of the Logan Municipal Council. We will have our opening ceremony this evening. David Zook has graciously agreed to open the meeting for us and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. It's not often we get the county executive to come on over and help us out on the last minute.
Happy to help. Thanks for the opportunity. Would you all please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Gosh, David, I thought maybe you were going to have words of wisdom that just popped into your head.
Those are coming up.
Oh, okay. Oh, good. Happy to know that. Our next order of business this evening is to accept the minutes and approve the agenda.
I will move acceptance of the agenda and the minutes.
I'll second the motion. We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Our regular meeting schedule is the first and third Tuesdays at 5:30. Our next meeting is September 7th, 2021. And y'all better come because we're going to talk about the new library. So I'm really excited. And now, number 5 on our agenda. I won't try and talk too closely. Questions and comments for the mayor and council. If you have a question or a comment on something that is not otherwise on the agenda, please step forward, state your name, make sure you sign in the sign-in sheet, and take about 3 minutes.
My name is John Eastman. My folks' place is on 815 Canyon Road here in Logan. I have signed in on the sign-in sheet with my name and phone number. The information only, no decision needed right now, just to make you aware as a council and as a mayor of a situation that's going on in continuance with the canal collapse that happened back in 2009. The city has done a good job doing a trail from where Hearns Inn would be in and along and behind and getting to the property generally known as the Lob area and the park, Canyon Road Park, I think is what they call it. Things have stopped, and legally, I guess, that's part of what we got to figure out, from the Canyon Road Park on down to 6th East. As I understand it, there's license from the canal company and their right-of-way that powers and maintains the trail east of Canyon Road Park up to Hearns Inn. But no such license or no such provision has been made west of that, where my folks' property is at 815 Canyon Road. And therefore, maintenance has not been done on that section. Maintenance previously was done by me near solely as what was called a lengthman for the canal. And I worked with the canal company back when they had the right-of-way through there. They have functionally and operationally abandoned the canal right-of-way from 6th East up to the collapse at Canyon Road Park. I don't know what legally that means other than they no longer have current operations and have relinquished the control of a gate that's behind apartment buildings just off of 6th East that you would use to access that canal access road in behind the properties there. That gate was one of 3 that I used to use for doing tree work and installing 2 bridges which still exist and are still officially used by the city. The current situation does not allow for any big, medium, or small size equipment to gain access for any kind of maintenance, tree work, bridge placement, or other fire line and fire prevention activity. That is like a black hole that's non-jurisdiction, non-defined, the best that I can determine. It was understood that there's been some miscommunication and misunderstanding just in my poking around and figuring out what I needed to do to gain access and continue the maintenance work that I had been doing. I move in and out of town, and in fact, I had just gotten another job offer to be head of public works for a small town up in Montana. So I'm not here in Logan full time. But anyway, I need to be replaced, and my function needs to be replaced. And so, just so that the city and the council is aware, there needs to be some sort of investigation and some sort of looking into the situation behind there. My dad, quote, has said, that is a real loss to society and to this town if it is that that trail is no longer going to be able to exist. Because he's very supportive, the owner of 815 Canyon Road, in having a trail behind there. But there's been some other stuff come up with the property owners at that west gate that looks like that's not going to be possible. And right now, there's a serious risk to safety in its current condition.
Thank you very much, I appreciate that.
No problem.
And could you make sure your email is on the sign-in sheet?
I haven't put an email on there, but I will, and then what I'll do is if I expect an email, please respond within a week, because email requires me to go and capture any of your spam stuff, and so I'll actively look for your email within the next week. So even if you don't have an answer, if you can just respond, hey, I got your email or whatever, then I can find your stuff and bring that out of spam so that we make that connection. I have a specific provision for that, so.
And the property owner, again, there is private property at the end of the trail. The trail goes up until the private property, but they have told us that they will not allow people to access that, and it is private.
Right, me and Russ Aquina has been great to work with, had an actual meeting up there at the end of the gate, and the property owners are sitting there actively frustrated as community members are moving across that trail right into their private property. But when it's a non-thing legally, when you look at my mapping and my information, there's a black hole and it says right on it, undescript, non-legal definition, non-thing. Until I know what that happens, I am not powering it. So that trail is closed, according to me. My dad supports having the trail, but my dad knows now he has to hire a contractor or someone else to power any maintenance, but they can't get up there either.
Well, they could come in from the east end, so.
Well, they would go up through your city park, which isn't viable right now in terms of equipment.
Well, I think that you brought up some really good points, and I know Holly well enough to know that she's a trail advocate and she will look into it. And
I'm afraid it's just fallen through the cracks, and I feel, and I apologize to the public, to the city as a whole, and to you for not having come to the meeting earlier, as I knew that this was happening some years ago, but I was being reassured that things were being taken care of, and what was happening east of us was going to transition and continue all the way down, and it just never did, and I haven't been here full time to actively monitor it, so maybe I could have done something more to bring this.
That's okay, we'll work on it now,
Yeah.
Absolutely. And Russ is very aware, and
Yeah,
Holly
Russ is aware.
and so we will.
You're right, I've talked with the fire marshal, Greg Humphreys, he knows what I talk with him every year as we do a firefighter's plan. I have evidence of fireworks being launched up there, and we just lucked out, haven't caught fire yet. And so it's actively monitored by me, but thus far only me. So this is a powerful way to be able to bring it to the public's record and to you guys. So
Thank you
that's
very
why
much.
this exists, I'm sure. So
Thank you very much, I appreciate your time.
I will go and get that email on there.
Thank you very much. Have a wonderful evening. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak to the council? Seeing no one, we'll move on to mayor staff reports. Mayor?
Good, and I will just start briefly before we go to items A and B on the agenda under my item. I have some more exciting news to announce this council meeting. As you know, 2 weeks ago, we announced the $1 million private gift for the Center Block Plaza. And I am going to read the press release and the announcement that will go out as soon as I make this to the media, but we're really tickled about this one as well. Logan City Mayor Holly Daines has announced a $250,000 challenge grant for Logan's Center Block Plaza from the George S. and Dolores Dory Eccles Foundation to be awarded as the last dollars towards the project's $2 million goal. With $1.3 million secured to date, the city is working to raise an additional $450,000 from the private sector to qualify for the Eccles Foundation's pledge of support. Our directors are excited to be a part of this great revitalization project for downtown Logan, said Lisa Eccles, chairman and CEO of the foundation. What a wonderful difference the plaza will make for residents and visitors alike, offering a warm and welcoming gathering place with activities, performances, concerts, and more. The plaza stage will be named in recognition of the foundation's generous grant. Added Ms. Eccles, my grandfather's aunts and uncles, including George Eccles, were raised in Logan, and they cherish their memories of growing up at 250 West Center Street, where the historic David and Ellen Eccles residence still stands today. Our Eccles family's affection for Logan has remained strong for generations, and we continue to value the community's rich history and bright future, highlighted by its outstanding contributions to our state in areas from education, the arts and culture, to agriculture, outdoor recreation, high-tech industries, and more. The city is extremely grateful to the Eccles Foundation for its confidence in this project to help revitalize downtown, said Mayor Daines in announcing the gift. We know arts and entertainment events will draw people downtown, and the stage will be a prominent feature of the new plaza. There will be regular programming to delight and entertain all our citizens. The George S. and Dolores Dory Eccles Foundation is dedicated to serving the people of Utah by furthering the philanthropic goals of its founders, supporting projects and programs that make a significant difference in bettering Utah's communities, enriching the lives of citizens in every corner of the state. As one of the state's largest and most generous charitable organizations, it contributes to meet needs and foster opportunities in areas including community and social services, education, health and wellness, arts and culture, and preservation conservation. The foundation is led by its board of directors, including Spencer S. Eccles, F. Eccles, chairman and CEO, Lisa Eccles, president and COO, and Robert M. Graham, secretary, treasurer, and general counsel. So that's exciting that we have another $250,000 to get our goal to the $2 million. We've raised an additional $0.3 million to add to the lod's generous contribution. So we're continuing to work all that and encourage anyone that's interested in helping us to let me know. But that's great news. So that's our goal, is to get to $2 million.
And do we have a time period for that?
The Eccles Challenge Grant goes until June of 2022. So we do have some additional time to work on that. All right, thank you for letting me insert that. Like I say, that news just is officially announced. Item 6A is board appointments. As you saw from the material we sent out, we have 4 new citizens who are interested and willing to serve on the Logan Light and Power Advisory Board. So I'm asking for ratification of those 4 individuals. Their names are Paula J. Allen, Kevin Bales, Joel C. Ellsworth, and Nathaniel Wheeler.
Paula's here, isn't she?
Oh, there's Paula. Excellent. Paula's on the back row. Thank you. Stand up and be recognized. Is there anyone else that is being nominated that's here tonight? Great. So, again, she's just said she's a citizen who's interested in being involved, which I think is wonderful. That's what we like. So.
Normally I know them, but I read the descriptions, resume, vita, whatever you want to call it, and I'm amazingly amazed. I'll just say that. How's that?
That's really good.
I don't know, Mayor, where you get these wonderful people.
You know, I sent out a list, an email to our neighborhood council list saying, is anyone interested? And there actually was one that is a commercial customer that Mark came up with. But the other three were simply from reaching out to folks that we worked with on the neighborhood councils to say who's interested. And we had a great response.
Well, they sound wonderfully qualified, so I move that we approve them.
Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you, Mayor.
Great, and we will be contacting those people about our next board meeting. So item 6B, now I'm just delighted to announce that we have 2 fine individuals representing our county, of which we're a part, here in attendance tonight. You heard the pledge from David Zook, who is our relatively new county executive, and I must say that he has hit the ground running and is out and about and getting up to speed on that, that large slate of issues. And of course, we have many issues on the agenda that concern both of our jurisdictions, and so we're really making an effort to try and communicate better, and we have recognized Gina Worthen, if she'd stand up, who is the chair of the Cache County Council at the present time, and we appreciate her attendance, and again, just trying to establish better communication between our 2 groups. So we thank them for coming. David Zook's going to make a few remarks. Gina, if you have a brief remark, you're welcome to make that, but thank you for coming.
Thank you, Mayor Daines, and thank you, council members. It's a pleasure to be here this evening, and thank you, Gina, for coming to, as you mentioned, Gina's our council chair, and as Mayor Daines mentioned, we've been working to strengthen our lines of communications between the county and Logan City, and that's something that we've been working on with all of our cities around the county. I've been kind of on a listening tour, visiting different cities, and I just want to let you know that Mayor Daines has been doing an outstanding job representing you. We've had, today was the 3rd meeting that Gina and I have had with Mayor Daines talking about a number of issues that are of mutual concern to us, including the airport, solid waste, public safety, the new bioreactor that we'd like to help you get out at the wastewater plant. So we've been working on a number of these issues, and we just want to let you know that we enjoy the partnership and the collaboration, and we look forward to continuing to work with you and to support those needs. I'm a citizen of Logan myself, so I'm one of your constituents as well. So maybe Logan has a little bit of a special place in my heart, and maybe I'll work a little bit harder to help, maybe. I don't know, try to be fair, but try to be fair to all my constituents. But I just want to thank you for the cooperation and collaboration that we've had, and I really enjoy the relationship I have with all of your council members. And I should mention Mark too. Mark Anderson has been to 2 of those meetings with Mayor and Gina and myself, and I think they've been very productive, and we're going to get some good things accomplished together. So we just want you to know that we're here to collaborate and be good partners with you. And one area in particular that maybe we haven't worked together on in the past, Mayor Daines was just talking about some downtown development. We're one of the largest landowners in the downtown also, and we'd love to be involved in those discussions and see how we can help too. So please reach out to us and let us know what we can do to help. Gina, did you want to add anything?
I hadn't really prepared anything, but thank you. Appreciate working with the mayor, and we worked with Jeannie today and talked with her, and we have in the past with Mark. And I think it's just good to have that communication between our councils. And I just thought of 2 updates that might interest you. The county is nearing the end of completing and creating an updated general plan that we're excited about, and we might be changing some zoning things and doing some different things. So I'm excited to see that be done. And then the other thing I thought you might be interested in, because I think you guys kind of did something similar, but we passed allowing wineries in the county, and we're working on the land use element part of that, and that's been at our planning commission and should be coming before the council in the next couple months to work that out. So I thought you might find that interesting and just wanted to share that with you. And thanks for the invitation to be here, and it's good to see each of you. Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Sure,
When I was
absolutely.
there, I saw there's a survey going on for, is it for input into the use of the fairgrounds? Is that, how long is that open for, and how do people access that?
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's still open, but we are updating our master plan for the fairgrounds. If that's not open, we'd be happy to take any input you have. You can always send it to one of us. My email address is david.zook@cashcounty.org, and I'll make sure that the people who are helping put that master plan together get that input. But thank
And
you.
we had previously talked about, some of the parking issues that the neighbors had brought to us, and I think that's part of what they're working to address is, some long-term parking solutions.
Yeah, if that's your comment, Mayor Daines has submitted that already.
I didn't have a chance to get my phone out to take a picture of the, whatever those.
The QR code.
QR code.
Yeah.
I was just, I think since it is right in the middle of Logan, I think our Logan citizens are being active participants in that as well.
Yeah, it's the fair. We just had the fair last weekend. It was a great event. We brought a lot of people to Logan. I don't know if any of you made it out, but the parking, there were a lot of cars. There were people parked as far away as Logan High School.
Wow. Well, the Cache Valley Transit is pretty good to work with and
Yeah.
provide buses.
They were doing that as well, yes.
So I think that, as the fair gets more and more popular, that's probably a service that will be more and more utilized if people are aware.
Yeah, I think that's definitely something we can improve is the outreach and letting people know that's available. 'Cause, yeah,
At either end of the, blue and green, the loop, and then get on the other bus and go out to the fairgrounds. So.
yeah, if you're going to walk all the way from the high school, you might as well get on the bus and get dropped off at the front door.
Yep.
Maybe if that's still going on, maybe we could send a link, you guys could post it somewhere.
Yeah.
So that Logan citizens can find it on your website and give us some
That would be
input.
great.
That would be great.
And especially maybe send it to our Woodruff Neighborhood Council that's right in that area. I'd be happy to send that out to them.
That would be great to
Awesome.
hear from them.
Yeah, I'll check on that right now.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks again for the opportunity, and my door's always open.
I don't have a door, but you can always call me.
I used to be able to knock next door if I wanted to talk to you, but not anymore.
So thank you to David and Gina. We appreciate their time, and that completes my report.
I'm
Oh,
sorry,
thank you
can I
very
just
much.
make a comment on
No, ma'am.
that? I can't?
Uh-uh.
Oh, okay, I just wanted to talk to us out here. Okay, I'll do that,
That'd
thanks.
be great. We'll move now to council business. The only thing on council business is a planning commission update, and it was a very busy, very long planning commission. There will be a rezone coming to us of the 1.2 acre lot that is currently an LDS church on the corner of First East and Second South. The opponent, the person who has the option to buy this, wants to rezone it from traditional neighborhood and R6 to Town Center 1, which is sort of a big leap. Anyway, there was some discussion, and that will come to us for more discussion and a public hearing. We saw the plans for the mixed-use housing development that is going to go in on First West and Third South. They will have some, they get some density bonus for having as much retail on the main floor as they do. So I believe, I can't remember the number of units though. 69 units. And they will be market rate housing, I believe. Shepherd Development, they're just building an industrial building in the industrial, and it was zoned industrial, so that was okay. There was a distribution center that was approved. There will be a new drive-in restaurant, so far unnamed, between Chick-fil-A and the 7-Eleven, 14th North. And so that design concept was approved. Blue Springs requested a subdivision, which was approved. And the Cottonwood Park subdivision was approved, which is a 3.11 acre parcel on 600 North and 400 West that will become 12 single-family residential lots. So there'll be 12 lots on that. And the remainder of the evening was spent talking about accessory dwelling units, which will be a workshop for our, for later on tonight. So we'll talk about it then. Is there any other business anybody would like to talk about right now? Okay, we'll move on to our action items. We have a public hearing on a budget adjustment. Does anybody have any questions of Rich before we open it to the public? This is a public hearing. If anyone wishes to speak to this issue, please come to the microphone and state your name. Seeing no one, I'll bring it back to the council for action.
I'll move acceptance of 2142 resolution.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
I will second that.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. B is not a public hearing, but it is the consideration of a proposed resolution approving the telecommunications franchise agreement between the City of Logan and Comcast. Does anybody have any questions about that, or would you like a short review?
I can give you just a brief update real quick.
Okay.
We have not received the updated contract from Comcast yet, so we still need that franchise agreement from them. They were incorporating some federal regulations into the contract. We haven't seen it yet. I got an email this morning that said they'd get it to us today. Still haven't seen it, so request.
So we need to continue
I
this?
would ask you to continue it to the next meeting.
Okay. I will entertain a motion to continue this.
I will enter a motion to continue resolution 21-43 to September 7th. Is that your word?
Yay, we're gonna add it to September 7th.
Is that working for 7?
Yeah, that should work.
Okay.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. We'll work now on to our workshop items. First is Mike, Land Development Code. Woo-hoo!
Let me turn this thing on. Okay, we're going to workshop accessory dwelling units. Get this thing in a slideshow.
I love all the paper maps in my car.
What's that?
I love all the paper maps in my car.
Well, we'll show them to you. So, ADUs, this is this is kind of a definition that we found. It's a little dated, but really what an accessory dwelling unit is just a second small dwelling unit on the same property, either detached or attached. It could be an apartment over the garage, a tiny house, a basement apartment. But generally an ADU should have a separate entrance, a separate walls, bathroom, kitchen, separate living quarters relative to the actual unit. So this came about through the 2021 Utah State Legislature, House Bill 82. It mandated internal accessory dwelling units, and it's effective as of October 1st. So we need to adopt some regulation by October 1, otherwise it just goes into effect and it's blanket wide. So an internal accessory dwelling unit means an ADU that's created within the footprint of the primary dwelling at the time the ADU is created. So you can't do, according to what internal means, is you can't do something that's out in the backyard. You can't do a detached. It's got to be associated with the primary dwelling. You can adopt regulations that are less stringent, so you could allow for detached ADUs, but really what they're saying is we at least have to do something with an internal ADU. Primary dwelling, it's got to be within a primary dwelling, which means a detached single-family dwelling that is occupied as the primary residence of the owner of record. So it cannot be established in a rental property or multifamily dwelling.
Just to go back, you said that a person could add a garage.
Yeah, you can add on to your primary dwelling, so you could.
Oh, you can add on to the dwelling?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so as long as it's within the footprint of the primary dwelling, you just can't do a detached type of ADU. It's got to be a long-term rental, 30 consecutive days or longer, so you can't do an ADU and create like an Airbnb or a VRBO. According to the state law, they're considered permitted uses in all residential zones. And as a city, we cannot restrict an ADU based on the size of the ADU in relation to the size of the single family. We can't restrict it based on total lot size or street frontage. It's got to comply with all the applicable building, health, and fire codes. So as a municipality, we can do these things, and within the proposed language that the Planning Commission forwarded to you, all these things are in there as regulation. We can prohibit a second utility meter, prohibit a change in the appearance of the dwelling, require one additional parking space, require parking replacement if they use the garage to convert that to an ADU, prohibit an ADU in a mobile home or with a failing septic, and then require a permit or a license to establish an ADU. We can also require a minimum lot size of 6,000 square feet. We can prohibit the use of ADUs for short-term rentals, and then we can prohibit the use of an ADU in a non-owner occupied residential dwelling. So when the state
legislation prohibited those last three.
It does, but we can also do that as well.
So, okay.
But you have the ability to say, we want to go less restrictive. Does that make sense? So as a city, we can also say, you don't have to have this much, you can have wide open lot sizes, you don't have to prohibit it for less than 30 days. So you have that discretion as a city. So what they did, as most are aware, when they crafted the language, if you're a university town, you can restrict it to basically 67% of the land area, you could say no ADUs. 33% of the land area, you could say yes, we'll allow for ADUs. And what this roughly equates out to is that on residentially zoned acres in Logan City, we have 4,351 acres roughly. We can say that we've got to permit them on at least 1,436 acres, okay? I'll go over this later in a different map, but there are some benefits to an ADU. It allows for new housing, affordable housing, you can put them close to transit, close to work and school. There's some good reasons to do it, but there's also some negative reasons to do it, given our context as a university town. And what we believe is that the highest demand will be near Utah State. We just think these will become student housing. We think this will lead to occupancy and parking problems. We believe that this undermines our campus residential zone, which was created to move more student density near the campus. You know, we've been working on residential character of our core neighborhoods through a variety of programs. We think this undermines that. And it also will be a challenge for us with enforcement. We did accessory dwelling units back in Logan in between 2000 and 2003. We permitted 10 at the time. 8 of them were in Adams, 2 of them were in Wilson. And when you look at the addresses, they generally cater to the university crowd, and that's why they were created. Since that time, since 2004, they haven't renewed their permission or their permits to keep doing the ADUs. They've all since expired, and 5 were denied for grandfathering. So the crux of the issue really is, where do you put these in Logan City? And so we presented 6 options for the Planning Commission to look at. The first one was citywide. And when you apply all those criteria to it, all the residential zones, you have a minimum lot size of 6,000 square feet, owner occupied in a detached single family. This shows you approximately, there's 4,400 acres and there's 5,200 properties that are involved. So this shows you a distribution citywide, that they potentially could go in.
So can I ask a question?
Yeah.
4417 is different than the number you had before.
Yeah, and I'll show you this map with a different number on it, because this is going through GIS. This doesn't include the acreage from the recent annexations. So we're having a challenge in trying to get an accurate acreage count between us and GIS. So, but we'll get you an accurate number.
Okay.
This is rough.
Okay.
The second approach was non-NR6 areas. That's our largest amount of residential acreage. So this would be everything zoned NR2 through CR, excluding NR6. And again, it's the same criteria, greater than 6,000, owner-occupied, detached, single family. This was approximately just a little over 2,000 acres and involved about 1,486 properties. And that spreads it away from the campus and applies it elsewhere in the city. This one, we started at Utah State, and then we went out as far as we could, and then we started backing back in to get to about 1,500 acres. And this is where that ended up.
What's the mileage distance from that edge to USU's campus, just out of curiosity? Is that 2 miles? Is
Any
that
idea, Russ?
3?
2 or 3 miles, yeah, I don't know exact. But we just tried to draw the bubble as far as we could and then kind of back it back in. This next option, we looked at applying the rationale of an ADU in terms of employment and transit. And so we put these around Main Street and around Utah State, figuring that if you took out the student equation, this is where people, work and need to get access to transportation. Again, this is 1,500 acres, 2,200 properties. This is within a quarter mile of Main Street in Utah State, and it just is above the Y. This option, we took out Utah State and we applied it just on Main Street. It's all residentially zoned properties along Main Street, and it goes approximately 3 blocks in on either side. And this one ends up with about 1,500 acres and 950 properties. And this just focused on USU campus, put it right around that as a employment side as well as for students.
So the colored areas are all each individual lot that is greater than 6,000 square feet, or is it? Because I thought we just were supposed to cover acres.
Yeah, so this teased out those lots that were smaller than 6,000 square feet, owner occupied, detached, single family. That's the criteria we use just to establish whether or not you could do one there. But we could do it from a different approach and just say, here's the total acreage, regardless of these criteria, and apply those later, and then let it narrow itself down. So I'll show you the next map that has a little bit better definition of this. But basically, the Planning Commission recommendation was to go with a citywide approach with an exclusionary buffer around Utah State, but they did not provide a rationale for how big that should be. So here's a little bit better map that shows citywide, and on the bottom, and I think you've got a copy of that, shows the key color coding for each specific residential zone, the eligible acres, and again, we did this eligibility based on 6,000 square feet, single family owner occupied, and primary dwelling of record. We could step back from those criteria and just look at gross acreage.
So things that are zoned residential, but in a non-single family home, residential designation are eliminated from this map. So if it's a or a town center or a campus residential, that's not reflected on this map, correct? Because this is just all single family dwellings.
It's all residential zones. So all NR2, 4, and 6 are single family, MR 9, 12, and 20, and 30 are multifamily, but they're still residentially based. CR is a residentially based zone. And then the RC, which is resource conservation, and we talked about, do we include that or not include that? It does provide for single family, but on a larger lot scale, so we threw that in there, we can talk about that. But this map does show you, like for example, NR6, that's the brighter yellow color, and within those areas, you see individual lots. So those individual lots show you that that's an eligible lot in theory for a ADU based on 6,000 square feet or larger, owner-occupied, detached, single family. But the area around those blocks are still within that zone.
Mike, could I ask a question?
Sure.
Normally, a residence could have either a nuclear family, or they could have 3 non-related individuals. So with the accessory dwelling unit, does that mean there's 6 people, meaning 2 times 3 is 6?
Yeah, potentially. So
No, because it has to be owner occupied.
Yes.
Upstairs.
No, so it's I could buy the house and own that home as my primary residence of record, and then I could have 2 of my friends live with me, and then I could create the ADU and put 3 more people in that accessory dwelling unit. So yeah, total occupancy, if you do it that way, would be 6. But you could still do a family in one unit and a family in another unit.
Another question is the 30 days. At least gut feel for myself, why wouldn't we want to have a longer, not so short?
30 days is the cutoff for where you define long-term occupancy versus short-term occupancy. So that's standard, and I think it's standard in state law. It's everything but 30 days and beyond is considered a long-term residential.
Can we make it longer?
That's a legal question. Probably not.
Greg, can we make it longer?
The 30-day?
Yeah.
I think we can make it more restrictive, but that's, before I give a definitive yes, let's look into it, so.
Okay.
That's typically the standard that we've used to define short-term versus long-term.
I think it would be in the best interest of any neighborhood to have a longer term. I mean, at least, 6 months.
I mean, that reflects a month-to-month type of lease arrangement. And we don't, like when we deal with occupancy or any other types of issues with housing, we don't require, you have to have a year lease in this case, and I don't think we can. I think 30 days is that standard.
Our lease flips to a 30-day lease after a certain period of time, so if you require a longer than 30-day lease, you would not allow month-to-month rentals. So we had to, I would be uncomfortable with that if someone lives somewhere for a year and then wanted to go month-to-month, they wouldn't be able to because that.
So any more questions on this map? Here's another approach. This is the Main Street campus residential approach, and this shows you where we reach 1,500 acres of residentially zoned property along Main Street as well as the CR zone, and shows you the total number of eligible properties, 1,475. But this extends from Main approximately 4 blocks to the east and then 4 blocks to the west.
From what's the what, north and south?
This will go all the way to the northern boundary, all the way down to the southern boundary, but you mean stuff from 14th North up to the border with North Logan, there's not a lot of residential zone property.
So that would negatively impact the Adams neighborhood substantially.
It's got, yeah, predominantly in Adams.
How does that differ from the main, that other one that was Main Street USU, or what was the third one?
It's essentially the same one. It's
The Main Street USU one?
yeah, and we did this one where it's Main Street only, and this one only extends 3 blocks in, and I don't know.
That goes to 200 East.
Yeah, it actually goes to 300 East.
300 East.
So is there the opportunity to narrow that and expand it elsewhere?
Yeah.
So,
So you mean like through the Main Street corridor, not to 300 East, but move that acreage somewhere else
yes.
outside of
Yeah.
the USU area?
Yeah, so the target goal is you've got to come up with about 1,500 acres citywide where you allow ADUs.
But we can carve them. You created some arbitrary but reasonable criteria. But we could carve them slightly different, but Jeannie was saying.
Yeah, you just have a recommendation from Planning Commission that says, we think it's a good idea to apply it citywide, and we think you should put a buffer around Utah State, but we don't know what that buffer is. Planning Commission said you guys should determine that based on public input. But that is, you could consider that, but that doesn't mean that you're tied to that. So it's,
And so you were coming up with staff recommendations.
yeah. So here's our recommendation is start small and evaluate to see if there's any success or failures. We also think that when we apply it to wherever part of the city, it should be equity in how we apply it. So it shouldn't be dumped on Ellis, or it shouldn't be dumped in Hillcrest. We need to be considerate of every neighborhood to make sure that it's not one taking the brunt of it, okay? When we start thinking about carving up areas, the challenge for us is how do we administer it, so we can do it through an overlay zone. It's easier to do it if it was applied to a specific zoning category. So as property is rezoned to, say, NR4 or whatever the right zone is, then it's easy to keep that in line as we regulate these. It's also important to remember that not all ADUs residential lots are created equal. So you may want to apply it in a certain location, but in reality, it won't work there, which may be good or bad, given the nature of the ownership of the land and how things lay out. What I predict is gonna happen if we're not careful is this fifth bullet, and we've seen this, is that you're gonna see parents buying these houses near Utah State with their kids and putting little Johnny on as the primary owner of record. Him and two buddies are gonna rent the top and then rent out three buddies at the bottom. We see it, we've seen it, we've responded to complaints about that, but I think that's, when you look at it from an investor's perspective, if I can buy a house, put my kid in there and his siblings coming through, and we can rent it out to 4 or 5 other kids, that's gonna pay for my mortgage and some of the tuition. And I think that's a business model we've seen and we will see. And that's the problematic approach of applying this near the university. It's gonna be a burden on us for enforcement, just like we deal with occupancy and parking. I think parking is gonna be a big issue. We can require 1 additional stall, but when you have 3 more people living in that ADU, there's 3 more cars, and they're gonna go somewhere, so we're gonna get the calls. Occupancy is always a struggle for us because we can't just go knock down doors. It's a process you go through. They have legal rights and due process, and it just takes time and it's lengthy. We recommend annual licensing. We recommend as part of that they do an owner certification every year. They certify that they're the owner, they live there, this is their primary residence, and we have them certify that under penalty of perjury. Require building permits for ADUs, and then we also assess impact fees on ADUs. And when we look at our impact fees, what we can assess on a new ADU are basically an impact fee for parks and for transportation, and it's about $1,700. Unless they trigger the need to go to higher electrical service or more water sewer, in terms of sizing, we could assess those, but for the most part, those are the only 2 that we can assess. And that's it. Any questions?
So have you discussed anything with enforcement as to, is there a stick associated with that? Like if you realize that somebody did have an ADU and they were not the primary homeowner, what's the penalty? I mean, that's my concern. I think some of the letters that were sent to the planning commission expressed that as well, is it's all well and good to say they're not allowed, but as a city and as a community development, how do you, if you catch somebody, what's the consequence? Like why wouldn't I just do it and go, oh, I'm getting $1,500 a month and no one catches me for a year? So have you thought about penalty fees or what?
It'll be our standard enforcement processes where we really try to gain compliance, and then we ratchet up as we go, but basically they're entitled to due process. So we can issue a citation, a civil citation, usually it's about $100 a day. We'll issue a citation, whether they pay it or not. We really can't go in there and start dragging kids out. That's the challenge. But it's ultimately, we can lien the property if we had to, take the small claims, but it does take time to get there. So it's like any other occupancy issue where we have over occupancy, we go through that process.
Is it important for us to have the stick be more substantial?
Yeah, I mean, you could. We did that a couple of years ago. We raised it to $250, I think, is the automatic ticket that we can write. And when you're dealing with a situation that, when you have a situation, and I'll say when you've got a lot of students living there and it's mid-semester, it's hard for those kids to move out and find something else, midway through the semester. So we typically say, fine, if you get a month and a half left, we expect compliance. But that, we get compliance, but sometimes we don't get compliance. We've had that problem as well. And so really it's the kids that are involved with it that may sublease who may suffer.
But it's all on the owner.
It's all on the owner, yeah. So we could look at elevating that penalty.
So from a legal perspective, is there any issues with eviction? Like if I'm a sublet, if I'm leasing an ADU and I don't realize that the owner is not in compliance and the city comes and says you're out, do we have to follow eviction protocols or I'm just curious what happens when someone's legally renting something?
If we're evicting the occupant of the ADU, or if they are not following the rules, or
Yeah, if they're not following the rules and we're saying, well, you can't have either the people living in the ADU or, to me, this enforcement piece is this is the crux of how this can work or not work. And
I think Mike's right. We have to go through that administrative process to find them and try to urge compliance that way. I don't know that we could evict, but we can take it to, we might be able to take it to the criminal court and go that direction, so.
So I have a question too about ownership. Does it mean 100% owner? or a fraction. You know, I'm trying to think of playing the game of something where I own 1% of something.
Like they do in Texas.
No, you have to live there.
I
You have to
know,
be the
but the
owner of record.
1% owner could live there and it solves the problem.
I don't know, Mike, if there's a good answer to that question. I mean,
The law says owner.
the law just says owner occupied.
And it says it's gotta be your primary
Primary
place.
residence.
Primary residence.
That helps.
And so there are, I think that maybe some of the challenges that arise from this is that there are going to be those issues that arise that we'll have to deal with
Well,
as they come.
wherever you have these rules, you'll have people to try to game.
So it's the primary residence of the owner of record.
Yeah, so that's where you get your mail, it's where when you fill out your tax returns, that you put that down. It's where you vote, it's where your legal domicile is, that's your primary place of, your primary residence. But there will be folks that use it and try to skate.
So is it going to be, I mean, I know I asked for the world the other day. Do we have any kind of understanding of how our neighborhoods are already divided up? So do we have an understanding of how many units, how many single-family houses in the neighborhoods have been divided in half or into two units?
Well, this map just shows you, from this perspective, looking down on it. So look at Hillcrest on the upper right-hand side. Generally these lots are all owner-occupied, larger than 6,000 square feet. So when you look at these lots, what that tells you is that Hillcrest as a group is fairly homogeneous in terms of ownership and occupancy. So those single-family detached residential. Cliffside, same thing, large number obviously, so it's a high percentage. You start coming down the hill and you get into Adams, the larger blocks of yellow, that shows you that there's zone residential, there are probably going to be residential buildings, but in the case of some of these blocks, you've got 3 parcels that are owner occupied. Some blocks have a higher number of owner occupancy, but
How do you tell?
well, that little black, we're showing you parcels. Let me pull up the other map to see if we can't zoom in.
Because these are teeny tiny little squares.
I'm just saying.
And Ernesto's the only young eyes up here.
Yeah. Let's see.
Ernesto, can you tell?
Okay, so on this map right here, you see where 7th North is?
Mhm.
Okay, let me blow up a little bit more for Jeannie.
Thank you.
So just follow, here's 7th North where my cursor is. And across that spectrum going east to west, this block right above it, where I'm circling, each one of those black squares or rectangles represents an owner-occupied lot that would qualify for an ADU based on size. So in this upper northeast corner, see how that lot where my fingers are, it's not blacked in, that shows that it's either a rental, it's more than a single family. Same with, if you skip over one, go to the next one, same thing. If you go north, you've got a big parcel that's probably carved up into a number of individual ownerships that are rentals or larger than
So
single
if it's
family.
a full square, it's owner occupied.
Yeah,
If it's
right.
just yellow, there's probably property there that is rental.
Right. So,
Or empty.
yeah, there's not a ton of vacant acreage. Down here on Tom's neighborhood, the bulk of these lots are owner occupied and would qualify for an ADU. This subdivision. But as you move into the older part of town, right, the old core neighborhoods, you can obviously see that. This is down in Wilson in the island area.
So every one of those squares is a house that an owner is living in today that is on a greater than 6,000 square foot lot.
Correct. And so this is a point in time because see where my little cursor is? This lot, we show it meets those criteria. But if I sold this tomorrow to somebody else and they decide to use it as a rental, that little lot would go away. So we just looked at a point in time, if we went citywide, what's the impact? And the number on this is about 5,000 parcels that would be available to put an ADU in, if you went citywide, based on those criteria.
So it gives you a good feel if you look block to block as to what percentage of homes on that block are rental versus
Right.
occupied.
And then, so when you bring the argument back up to the Adams neighborhood, where you have Utah State, right? So you look at just the characteristics of this neighborhood, and there's a lot of land area in there that's not owner occupied, not single family. And I don't have the numbers for you, we give you a percentage. And when we did the Adams plan, we counted up the numbers, but we just haven't done it in a while.
That was a while ago.
Yeah, so this neighborhood and then the one to the south have taken the brunt of, the impacts of the university. This neighborhood over here at Hillcrest, when we did the Hillcrest plan, we looked at a period of time and that's slowly transitioning from owner occupancy to rentals. So whether that will keep going up the hill, who knows? It's all market driven. But you see a little bit of movement in here as well. So when we devise a strategy, you guys devise an applicability strategy, it's important to take that into consideration. Do you want to see an impact on the neighbors or in these neighborhoods? Because we think there will be impact, but at the same time, if you agree with what the purpose of an ADU is, provide affordable housing, things like that, then there's trade-offs. And what Kimber will tell you is we can't get too cute in our strategy, otherwise we might get slapped back by the state legislature.
Or we could get too cute and they won't have rooms.
That's what they
And I will say, my understanding from the state is it's not necessarily affordable housing, it's housing availability.
Yeah.
So I think that argument has kind of gotten a little bit skewed in the discussions here over the last couple of months. The intention wasn't to create affordable housing, it was to
More housing.
encourage housing availability. Yep. Because putting an ADU in actually might drive the price of the house up. And I think it's important too for people to recognize that if I go to buy a house that I'm going to put an ADU in, I still need to qualify for the mortgage on my own. Banks don't say, oh, well, we're going to assume that your unit is going to be rented all the time. So my concern is with the idea that this will help younger couples and younger families be able to afford a house if they can't afford it on their own. Right. Having an ADU in basement's not going to make them eligible for a mortgage. So that's why the affordability piece of this is, I think we got to kind of put that to the side. The issue is we definitely have a housing availability problem here. You see that all the time right now. People saying, I'm moving there, I can't find a place to live. And people complain about the price, but this was created for housing availability,
So directions on where the council wants to go, on what you want us to provide. We're going to hold the public hearing in your first meeting in September, and then there's obviously enough calendar time to hold a second public hearing if you need to. If there's information you want from us, and there's a direction you want us to see us go, we did this last Thursday night. We haven't had a chance to really do anything different than.
I'd be curious to see, if you went out, if you did a mile circumference around the university, what would that look like?
What part of the university do you want the mile to start at?
Yeah.
Do you want it to be all named? Do you want it to be the edge of the university? What do you?
I don't know. Just to see, because I kind of am of that mindset too. When we look at campus residential, obviously that's 2 whole blocks there that you cannot put ADUs in because it's got big apartment buildings in it. So to count that acreage, I think, is a little bit disingenuous. It's not that we could do it.
I'm willing to be a little bit disingenuous.
I know. So to me, that almost seems cleaner is to just say it's a perimeter versus, and then to me, it's the idea is let's try to do this in as small as a group as possible so that we can make sure it works before we open up to everybody.
Well, then we make the diameter just as big as we need it to be, and then the only it's on the edges.
Right, yeah.
Well, some of these we're starting as far away as we can from USU, and we work, as you said, incrementally and see how it works. I think one of the highest values is to make sure we don't hurt neighborhoods that are already hurt by too many absentee landlords. Now, I like the value, the positive value of having the ability for, say, a senior homeowner that may be struggling trying to maintain the costs and so forth, that this helps them stay in their home. I think that's a good thing. And I also really love the fact that it's owner occupied. I'm just worried about it. Are there unintended consequences where neighborhoods are gonna say, oh my gosh, what did you do to us? And we're having, serious problems.
Well, I think it's critical for us to choose a rational approach.
Right.
Which is partly why I would include campus residential, because then your rational approach impacts less people, but anyway.
Yeah.
I just think you have to choose something rational and something that you feel that you have done for a reason, whether it's because it's on transit corridors or whether it's next to employment centers.
A defendable reason.
Right. And, beyond that, I don't I personally, I've been to a lot of meetings now. I feel like we need to be as narrow as we possibly can be so that we can determine how this is gonna work. That's not to say, that's not to say that we wouldn't expand it, but just opening the city doors to it seems counter to what we worked really hard to accomplish in the legislative session. And it also seems to be a huge, huge nightmare for enforcement. And, just as soon as we do something like this, we have one extra parking place, we're gonna have the world's biggest snowstorm. And
We're praying for snow.
I know, but you know what I mean? It's like, and, Mike's right. We're gonna have parents who are gonna buy a house and put Johnny's name on the house and say it's Johnny's address and Johnny's paying the taxes and, oh, well, the LLC's really paying the taxes. But
But they do have to do construction to create the ADA unit though as well.
And they
it
have to
doesn't
have-
mean that.
And they have to have a landlord license.
Oh, well, I'm gonna put 3 kids in the basement, 3 kids up here. It has to have a kitchen, it has to have all of those.
And it
It has
has
to have a license, so it's not gonna open the door wide
Not
open.
overnight, but some of them are pretty easy to convert.
Yeah.
So it depends on how the house is originally constructed.
And they have to, I think that, I think this gives us the opportunity to look at how much is landlord licensing? And does everybody who owns a house that has more than one unit in it need to have a landlord license, and that's required? Does everybody need to do some sort of affidavit of this is how many people I'm you come in, you say, I understand I can only rent to 3 people in a unit, I have 2 units, I certify that this is what I have, and they do that every year? I mean, that too is a nightmare for people, but maybe that's what we have to do to get people to understand what this is gonna be like.
A minor
We have to clamp
addition,
down on everybody.
one minor detail, I know we're not getting into the details, but this would be, from a utility standpoint, basically a duplex. And so they would receive 2 sets of flats.
No, we can say they can't put in a second meter.
1 meter, but it's still 2 sets of flats. We like the 1 meter, but there would be still 2 sets of flats. And we do it across the whole city already. And so, just so people are prepared, and because it's basically a single-family home with a unit that it may or may not be occupied, we will charge them 2 sets of flats regardless of whether it is occupied, because we can't tell. If it had a different meter, that would be different, but.
But if they were to, say, I did this and now I don't wanna do this anymore.
We would have to have a process for formally getting out of the ADU.
Okay.
Similar to formally, we have this conversation with people who have a grandfathered duplex. We have them go through the process of actually getting rid of the grandfathering, so they'd have to go through the process of actually removing the ADU, and then we would charge them 1 set of flats. But just so people are prepared who might be contemplating it. And flats are around, I think, $90 a month, somewhere on there, for a residential unit.
So I just really think that we have a multitude of issues. I I think we have to develop a program plan for how we're gonna administer this. Whether that's like a booklet that you hand people and say, you know, this is how you can do it, this is where you can do it, and this is how much it's gonna cost you. Or whether, you know, I mean, there's beyond just defining the area, I believe we have more things to put into it. And I don't know whether you can do those subsequent to the definition phase, or.
We have kind of drafts set up to that side of it that will have a packet to go out to folks who want it, that will lay out the steps to get to where they want to be in ADU. But really for us, and I think everybody agrees on the standards and regulations. I don't know if you folks disagree on some of those criteria, but really it's applicably where are you going to allow these to happen in Logan City? That's really going to be the crux of, you know, kind of the issue that we need to resolve.
So Chairman Simmons, can I make a suggestion? Why don't we discuss, because this came to us from commission, they separated and discussed the guidelines and the ordinance and then the map. So do we want to shift the discussion and discuss the ordinance itself in terms of the, like, 2 meters, 6,000, all of those?
1 meter.
I'm sorry, 1 meter. But do we want to discuss that and whether or not we're in agreement on, or what people have questions on those? Because
Sure.
those came out of planning commission unanimously.
Right.
But we haven't really discussed that.
So
that part
the
of
criteria that
motion.
Planning Commission, you can go back to that slide, right? Remember that slide?
Yeah.
The criteria that Planning Commission agreed upon prior to determining where. So what did they decided? They agreed to all of those things, correct?
Yeah, so what they forwarded on to you, and I think it's gone out to you already.
Yeah, it's in the packet.
It's the proposed language in 1737 Land Development Code. Basically, A is it's applicable to a single-family detached residential unit that's the primary residence of that owner. Let's see, what else? It's got to be such in the footprint of the primary building. You can add on to it to create that, but you can't do a detached type of situation.
But if you do add on, you have to comply with setbacks in the area, right?
Yeah.
And it has to be in the footprint of the primary dwelling.
Right.
Well, no, I meant if you added a garage to the side and then made part of it an ADU, you would have to still comply with setbacks and all of that. Okay.
It doesn't negate anything else you have to comply with, but it just has to be part of that primary dwelling. So you can enlarge it all you want up to your building footprint, as long as you've got adequate parking to put in the ADU.
Are we going to try this evening or soon to show a preference for which A through F? I'd rank those that I absolutely hate and those that I like. But are we going to try to do that? Or are we going to just talk about, as Jeannie was saying?
Well, I think that we have to sort of wait till the public hearing.
Well,
But we can say what our preference is.
Right, but we also think for a public hearing, though, I think that we're going to have a public hearing also on 1737.
Right.
070. So I think if nobody has questions about that, if everybody was comfortable with what came out of planning commission, I think we could set that aside and focus on the maps. But I just want to make sure that nobody has any questions about those minimum standards. And I'm comfortable with them, but I don't know if Tom and Ernesto, are you comfortable with the landlord license, with the prohibiting them from separating the separate utility meter, all of the
30-day, it can't be anything shorter than 30-day rental. It's got to be at least 6,000 square foot lot, owner occupied. You got to have at least one additional parking space that complies with our parking standards. Yeah, it's everything we've got on here that's really what we're trying to codify.
It can't be a mobile home or a manufactured home.
Yeah.
Are there stipulations in there about, I'm sorry, about having it, that they have to have, building permits and they have to pay fees?
It says May. I don't know, May.
The language we put in there requires a building permit, And sometimes it's not gonna trigger a permit depending upon the unit, the way it's already been constructed.
Logan City building permit may be required
Right.
for creation of accessory dwelling unit that's in H.
We require a license, basically landlord license, ADU license. I really think in terms of the mapping, if you want to see a different direction or some other information we can provide to help you make a decision, then I just need some feedback on what it is you want. We can do kind of a buffer around Utah State in various increments. We can have Lyle run that for us, but if there's other approaches you want to see.
Maybe your suggestion of the radius, did you mean like an actual radius, or did you mean like blocks?
Probably blocks, but just kind of starting to step out, like what does it look like if it's if we block out a half a mile around the campus by block, and then what does it look like if it's 3/4? And then again, we have to balance that, when we take that out, what does that do to our acreage?
Right.
Right, so.
One thing, I think I don't know, at least my gut feel is that we're not trying to create student housing. We're trying to create affordable housing for citizens.
Available housing.
So,
Well,
in
by nature of the fact that this is it is gonna be more affordable, not legally affordable, it's just gonna be less money. If you're gonna use somebody's basement, obviously.
plus if you increase the housing units, that could potentially decrease the cost.
It should.
Right?
Although we're in a
It's the price
deficit.
of the house, even though the individual
Well,
person
that's-
renting it might be less. That's why I've been trying to
Yeah, the
avoid
house
the
value
affordable.
goes up.
Correct, I've been trying to avoid the affordable term because
Yeah,
affordable can apply to an apartment rental, it can apply to a house. And I think that's one of the things I struggle with is, as a private property owner who wants to increase the value of their house, this could be a way for them to increase the value of their house.
Well,
And we're
that's
taking
true.
that off the table depending on where we do this. And I know that was a big concern to some of the members of the planning commission was we're picking and, in their words, we're picking and choosing who has that opportunity and who doesn't. And so I'm just thinking but we are all part of the community. How do we balance the individual right with the right of that neighborhood or that community to protect their single family nature? So.
I have one question about the wording of the ordinance. Will we require an inspection prior to?
Yes, with the initial licensing. We treat that as a business license, so it will be required to have an inspection.
And it's part of our licensing regulations.
So it doesn't have to be in here?
We can ask Craig on that. I mean, it's going to be processed as a business license under 1705.
If it's processed under that, we can enforce it through that code section. I mean, it wouldn't hurt to have it in there, but yeah, it wouldn't
Because
hurt to
I
have
would
it
think
in.
an accessory dwelling unit should comply with all building health and fire codes. A building permit may be required, an inspection will be required prior to licensing.
Yeah, we can add that language in there. Like with a landlord license, we can't do inspections. It's not allowed. But with this, we're going to process it as a business license. We're going to go down the inspection route. And I didn't see anything that doesn't allow us to do that.
What is the cost of a license?
$75 is what we charge for a landlord license, so we figured it'd be the same.
Could we run all landlord licenses through the business license process? Because we've been concerned about some of the some of the rental units and their suitability, their safety, and again, we don't have the right from the state to go in after the fact and check, but could we start running all landlord licenses through the business license process?
I'm going to look at Craig, and in the past, we've been able to do that.
That's one we just have to explore. I don't know.
It'd be interesting to know.
Yeah, it's a question I've asked before. But I think we should explore it.
The question, circling back to Tom's question about the 60-day period or the 30-day, the state code, I looked at state code again, it only enables us to do prohibit less than 30 days. If we were to go 60 days, it would make it more restrictive and would be contrary to state code. So I think the answer is no, we could make it longer. We could go less, but not longer.
I don't like this.
Take it up to the legislator.
Well, I don't think it serves a neighborhood to have 30 days is still short.
So what direction would you like to give to staff for the next meeting? Otherwise, we're gonna look at the map forever and ever.
I know. Well, I do think that idea of the business, like the Main Street business corridor makes sense to me because it's close to the transit center, et cetera. I think that makes sense that that's an area that maximizing housing makes sense, especially as we try to work towards a less car-centric community.
But I'd be concerned about having that boundary, even though it doesn't cover all of Adams neighborhood, even going to 300 East. It's quite a bit of the Adams neighborhood, and again, they do feel impact from student rentals all the way down to Main Street.
Well, I had asked if there was a way to craft something that did that corridor, used that corridor, but narrowed it to the west side of Second East and then east side of Second West.
Yeah, we can do that. You know, one option that we've talked about is applying it in all the mixed residential zones, or the MR9 through 30, and then the CR zone. They're already multifamily anyways, so they're accustomed to that. Maybe do a corridor along Main Street that's narrower than Second West or Second East, but also include the MR zones. That might give us, you know, at least close to the acreage. I mean, we can see what we end up with there.
Well, you've got in MR12, you have 140 eligible houses.
Yeah, but again, multifamily 12 allows for 12 units to the acre, so you've already anticipating some kind of growth or development there. And really,
But what I'm saying is there is a substantial number of eligible homes within that zone.
yeah, and on this map, these lighter brown areas are MR12. So it's scattered throughout. It's along that Main Street corridor, but again, the underlying zoning allows you to put in a duplex or a fourplex now, so it's not like you're impacting an NR6 or a standalone single-family residential area. You're already anticipating growth and development there.
But neither of those, well, that proposal though, I think again, to an individual who may live on the west side who says, well, I might want to do a ADU to help, you know, if we're only along the Main Street, we're also not really honoring what our planning commission said, which was try to do it as citywide as possible, like to keep, kind of protect that Adams neighborhood. So I would like to see us extend it out and both east and west, east of the university and west of Maine in some way, so that we are spreading it out across the city.
But again, it was interesting to look at the map and see how Wilson neighborhood was also impacted. I didn't really realize Wilson was impacted as much as it was with, I mean,
and if you go out 4 blocks, and I mean, I know about as the crow flies, you can exclude a lot of that area down in the historic area, and that historic area of the island. If you're kind of going 4 or 5 blocks away from the university border, you are kind of protecting those neighborhoods.
Well, 5 blocks puts us to Main Street off of the boundary of campus residential. And then, you know, when you drop down, it takes out most of the part of Wilson, then swings back up and takes out a part of Hillcrest. And then you're going to put that on the upper edges of Hillcrest and Cliffside, and then on the west side.
Well, are we going to suggest a couple of options here?
Sure.
I like E, which is a Main Street employment. I think I modified per what Gina had said. Push it narrower. I also like C, Charlie. Non-USU. That reduces it down to a small group that we could always add to later.
And this one builds on what Amy has said, is, you know, start do some kind of buffering around Utah State. Like I said, we did it just the opposite. We went as far as we could and then start backing back into the city to get at least to that 1,500 acres. So we'll do the rings around. We'll just try to do it incrementally, see what we get. I mean, we'll try to give you a series on that, and we'll evaluate Main Street again and narrow it down and see where we need to kind of pick up the extra.
Okay.
Because I think to Mayor Day's point, you can kind of see those lumps of, in the Wilson neighborhood that are already primarily rental, some of those blocks, so you can figure out a way to
Well,
exclude those.
I think from our perspective, if we just have GIS draw, a common boundary around, we pick a point on Utah State on campus, say this is where we're going from, and then go around it, and then see where that leaves us. And then if you guys want to adjust those boundaries based on the characteristics, that would be a good discussion to have.
So it would leave the west, it would leave the east, and focus on, and narrow down Main Street, is that what?
Yeah, so we'll do a series of maps that draws kind of rings around Utah State, using some kind of increment. And then we'll do something along the Main Street corridor that doesn't go any further than 2 blocks east or west of the Main Street corridor.
Can you use, so Old Main always sticks out to me as being like the center point, but it's really not the center of campus anymore. But it could be a center point that you could use, but wherever.
Yeah, we can pick a common point there.
Ernesto, do you have any comments that you'd like to make or any suggestions?
I've heard both people pro this and against this, and the only thing that came to mind is that when we were talking about keeping it to the southwest, it sounded too prohibitive to me based on some of the pro comments that I heard. Just
Too prohibitive in terms of,
or too restrictive of
too
this,
restrictive
yeah,
in
of
terms
the
of
location. If we started with that narrow of a scope, I think that we will hear the other side of, like, I really was looking forward to.
well, I think that's, to my mind, I want to see how this works. And I want to see whether the legislature changes their mind somehow. And I don't want us to be like wide open. So, but I want us always to have the opportunity of expanding it in the future if that becomes something that people are really talking about. So I don't know,
No, and I am in favor as well of being a little protective of those areas that are sensitive to over-occupancy.
Overparking.
And overparking, for sure. So, does that give you enough, Mike?
Sure.
Amen.
So a question though, like, so when we're having a public hearing in 2 weeks, what are people coming prepared to address though? Because if the maps are only being presented at the meeting, how do we solicit public input between now and then? Like, will the maps could be?
We don't have to vote on it, we can get the input.
We can have 2 public hearings.
Right.
So I think that should probably be our way forward because I think it's hard to craft on the fly. And so we need to hear the public input of, a couple of options that we've sort of come to. And then weigh those and make changes and have another public hearing and say, okay, is this gonna work? Kind of thing.
Yeah, we'll send them out when we have them available, and we can post them on the website. We can go through the mayor's neighborhood groups. Anybody that testified or submitted comments, we can shoot them out that way. But you may have somebody that testifies at the public hearing that has a great idea that none of us thought about.
Right, that's true.
Kind of like the state, people how to redistricting.
Kinda.
Careful.
But I think that if there aren't any further questions, should we move forward? Or do you want to dwell on this some more, or what's y'all?
I'm good.
Yeah, I'm good. I think we can have the public hearing, which means we're going to hear from the public we can vote if it seems clear, or we can postpone, continue.
Okay,
We just have that done by October. So October 1 is the drop dead date, and otherwise it just goes into effect and then we're stuck.
so is it possible for us to vote on the restrictive language and then vote separately on the map?
Yeah,
So,
I mean, that's an option, because then what you're saying is that it's allowed citywide according to these criteria.
no, but what I'm saying is, can we split them so that the restrictive criteria could be voted on maybe next time after the public hearing? But if we haven't determined the map yet, we would have another public hearing the next meeting and vote on the map.
So vote on ordinance 2114.
It would be cleaner to do them together. It'd be cleaner. But for example, say, you wanted to adopt the language, but you didn't want to make a decision on the maps for 3 months, then really the default is it's allowed citywide, but you adopt those standards that people would come in under.
So, but you would prefer, it would be your preference for us to have a map and restrictions at the same time?
Yes.
Anything else? Okay, thanks, Mike.
You.
We're gonna move on to unspent appropriations and carry forwards.
This has just been chomping.
Oh, it's my favorite council meeting of the year.
It's the most exciting part.
As you all know, our fiscal year bifurcates the construction period that we have in the state of Utah. So what it means is that at the end of the fiscal year, we typically have funds that are left over, but that have been appropriated toward a project we need to carry forward in the next year and use them as the capital project continues. A very good example would be the sewer treatment project, where currently we have 21 million left. We anticipate spending that to complete the project and spend the full 166 million that we have allocated for that project. So most of these, almost all of them, are capital related. There are a few for computer systems, elections, and maybe a few other design items or
audiovisual
upgrades for the council chambers. Those are ones that are not capital.
Visual especially, for you and the audio.
Those are really not the larger capital projects, they're still capital
You guys
projects.
sort of like when I make cracks like that.
Then at the bottom, we have our grants and restricted revenue. These are revenues that we collect that are specifically restricted for one purpose and one purpose only, like the alcohol shifts for our police department, or the transportation tax for our public works department, Class C, some of those types of items. And then we have our federal grants, state grants, and other grants that we have not completed yet that we're requesting to carry forward. So hopefully, if you've got any questions, I'll answer them. Otherwise, we will expect to bring this back at the next council meeting. Expect minor changes because we haven't received all invoices in yet. We wait until about now to workshop it because it's almost the time where we've collected all of them. But we may have a few trickle in the meantime. In fact, I know we will. And we'll change these numbers. I'll try to draw your attention if there's anything significant that changes, but anticipate these to go down a little bit unless we totally missed one, in which case we'll bring your attention to it.
Any questions? Okay, we'll move now to, you covered the RAPS grants as well. So that's a carry forward as well?
Yep.
Okay. Other considerations? Amy, you're on board.
I have a couple things I just wanted to make sure I mentioned, as people hopefully know. The Downtown Alliance, which we help fund through some of our RDA funds every year, it's their driving force to make sure there's place-based activities downtown that bring people there. They're hosting the Logan City Top of Utah Marathon again this year. It's going to be bigger and better than it was before. That's my statement.
Mo better.
Mo better. It's going to be September 18. They are still taking registrations. It's one of the interesting things about it for the people who are runners is it is part of the road marathon major. So people who run in this can help qualify them for other races. Boston. or London, I think even, depending on your times. So they are still open for runners, but they're also still looking for volunteers. So people are interested in coming out on the 18th and helping either with the setup or with prize distribution or things like that. They should go to loadingdowntown.org and click on their events tab and they can get information on the marathon. And then the other thing I wanted to talk about is with the latest executive order here for our country on electrical vehicle sales. And I just want to make sure that we're starting to think about that and talk about that, because if truly every 50% of electrical vehicles, if 50% of vehicles are going to have to be electric, is our city going to be prepared for that? And I'm assuming that city staff is already thinking about planning for that, but there are some cities that are already starting to put ordinances into place for new construction. So for example, Salt Lake City right now is well, no, I'm not saying we need to do anything. I'm just saying I think we all need to just kind of start to keep this in the back of our minds, because, you know, they're starting to look at, you know, electric vehicle ready parking. So if it's a MR20 or anything bigger, that there's requiring a certain number of spots to already make sure that the wiring is in place so that it can be added. So is that something we want to start to think about?
There are some changes that are coming down the pipe. So I responded to your email, and my response is let the market dictate it. So what's happening in the International Code Council, in one of their subcodes, it's the International Energy Resource, whatever the right code is. This year, they're considering an amendment to that to require new single-family dwellings are pre-wired for electrical, and then all multifamily and commercial projects, at least 20% of the parking is pre-wired or pre-designed to allow for wiring to happen. And so what happens if that gets adopted, there's a certain period of time before it becomes effective, and then the state of Utah will have a chance to respond whether they're going to agree with it or not. But I think within a couple of years, you'll see those mandates coming through that will be just part of the building code.
Okay.
So
that'll be set at the state level, that'll be a requirement, or it's just the general code for builders?
Well, it's a general code for buildings. So we permit and operate under the International Code Council. Those are the building codes that we use. The state has the ability to deviate from there under certain amendments, but they have to go through a process to amend it. So it depends on how the language comes out of it. We don't know if it'll be effective 2022, 23, 24. We don't know what year it'll be effective, and whether the state will say, we don't agree with it until 2026. So we just don't know what's going to happen, but it is on the horizon. So other jurisdictions are considering it, but that's really the avenue where you're going to catch it, is in the building permit phase, and that's where you'll have that avenue to require it as a percentage of whatever's being put in.
Is it possible for us to do it ahead of
I
time?
was to say, is there a reason we don't want to be on the front end of that versus on the back end? Because I mean, I know like Provo's looking at it, Salt Lake, Park City already has that 20% parking requirement in for any multi-family. I mean, if we think it's going to happen, and we're kind of in the middle of right now of this boom in
Well, it affects housing affordability for one element. I mean, if we're concerned about the price of housing becoming so out of reach for a lot of people, this just adds more money to that requirement or that impact. There's nothing gained by being the forerunner on a lot of this stuff. It's better to see what everybody else does and how it works. So I don't know, it's up to you guys, quite honestly, but I don't think there's any advantage to us to try to get out there and lead it. It's better to let that building code follow through and follow its normal cycle, because they're looking at it from a national perspective. And we're not a Provo or Salt Lake, we're Cache Valley. So the common vehicle here is a Ford 350 crew cab diesel, right? So there's a little bit of a cultural mindset to shift from that to an EV. And I think we'll get there, but I don't know if it will be, there's a demand for it yet.
There's also, we've been contacted by Utah Clean Energy, which is putting together a letter of support, again, to go to the state of Utah, filing an application to Utah's Uniform Building Code Commission to request the addition of electric-ready provisions to the 2021 Residential Energy Code, which is exactly what Mike was saying. So I am actually looking at signing on to that. Again, if it comes down at a state level, and it's just requiring homes to be ready for this. If it comes, then the consumer has the opportunity. So I may very well as the mayor sign on to that, it's probably something we'll send through our RESAP board, which, would come to you, so.
Can do to try to split, split the baby in half. I hate for that analogy. But if you read the Bible, that's right. Anyway, the point is, you don't have to have it fully ready, but you could have it so that not wiring, but conduit is installed. So that it doesn't have to be
Super expensive.
super expensive. You save the demolition or that type of install later. So I think, there's something to that. There's also.
But we're gonna get there through that process. It just may not happen this year, it may happen next year or the year after, but we'll get there. It's just whether you want to require it now. And I think in order for us to amend our building codes, we have to go back to that same process. Because we don't have our own building code per se. We implement basically that national code, which is modified at the state level. Yeah, and then we implement
So
that.
we can't have a building code overlay?
No.
Such a breath.
Nice try.
But I do want to make sure that, I think it would be interesting to let builders and businesses know that the state appropriated $5 million for putting these in, and there's still $2.7 million left. So if there is a business that's coming in, so like a Costco or whomever, if they start to put in those stations, they can apply and have 50% of the cost of it covered by the state grants, but they have to do it before they start the project. So I just think the more we can have this conversation, then maybe we start to move the needle too, so that the Ford F-150 isn't the only vehicle that's parked in parking lots, because maybe then people start to choose, well, I'm gonna go shop there because I know there's a charging station or anyway. But
I'm pretty sure that
nonprofits too can put these in and get it,
I don't think you're gonna go to Costco or Sam's because they have an EV charging station.
I'm gonna go there maybe never because it's only 2 people and they have lots of big packages, so.
Are you living around?
I'm a millennial.
Yeah, you're a millennial now.
I don't know how this plays in, but sometimes we say, well, I have an electric vehicle, I'll plug it in, therefore I'm not polluting. But then we're plugging it into a coal-fired plant.
Well, we're at least 50% renewables by now.
I know that, but it's not totally free. It's not like we're plugging it in and there's no pollution.
Yeah, but my concern is just if everybody, if truly manufacturers are gonna stop making diesel-powered cars, we should encourage people to be ready for that, I guess.
I actually, a long time ago, tried to get us to consider putting parking spaces all over downtown that were electric charging meters that you would pay for like parking meters. But there's a substantial infrastructure element to all of that,
That's for the city.
we ended up with 2.
Better than nothing.
We got
That's
one in front of the Ibis and one that used to be in the middle, right where Church Street hits First North, but I don't know if it's still there even. Is it there? Okay.
And other towns have them too. There's a couple of them towns.
And there's a few at the Employment Services, Jobs Workforce Services Board. Anyway, all right, moving forward, we're going to adjourn the council meeting. Oops, sorry.
Just wanted to add, as part of celebrations for the Hispanic Heritage Month, it's the National Hispanic Heritage Month, usually runs from middle of September to the middle of October. In Logan, we will have 2 different festivals. One will be September 11th. That will be the Hispanic Heritage Festival, which will happen at the Logan Library. And on September 18th, after the marathon on Center Street, there will be a Latino festival as well that will be happening.
That's wonderful. I know that the one at the library is very well attended.
Yeah.
I'm excited that we'll have it. We'll have to have a spot for it. Karen already left. We're gonna build a new building. We'll have to find a new spot for it for a year.
It'll still work on the plaza.
You got,
That's when they do it, is the plaza.
Okay, now, anybody else? Okay, we are adjourned as city council and we are reconvening for a workshop item as the Logan Redevelopment
you hit it
Agency.
again.
She didn't hit you, you were lucky.
Mark would do that.
Kurt, you're on.
Okay, sounds good, thank you. So in front of you, you do have a resolution for a proposed incentive to Cytiva, which is a life science company. There's an aerial just showing you where they're located. On the far left, that's 10th West, coming in from Highway 8991. And then, of course, kind of on the lower right is Highway 8991. So they've got their campus right there. They've been here a long time. They manufacture cell culture products that they then sell to various pharmaceutical companies that then take those components and manufacture. They've got cancer treatments, flu vaccines, an Alzheimer's drug, gene therapy,
And COVID vaccines.
and COVID-19 vaccines, yes. So they're growing. In fact, the company was already growing quickly over the last 10 years, but COVID has really launched that into another level, as you can imagine. So the company's been here in one form or another for a long time. I remember Rex Spendlove founded the company way back in 1967 as High Clone Laboratories. So in a sense, this is it is a homegrown company. Granted, the name has changed and it's been sold and gone through different iterations of ownership, but it's a great company that we're proud to have here locally. So we're here to talk about that growth brought on a lot by COVID and other business that they're doing. And they've approached the RDA and have asked for some financial assistance. So we talked about that. So the expansion opportunity looks like this. They would, over the next 3 to 5 years, create almost 400 jobs. Currently, last year they had about 350 employees. This year, in 1 year's time, they're up to 650. So this would put them over 1,000. So that's significant employment growth. Their capital investment you see there on the screen is about $240 million. And we're competing with sites around the U.S. and around the world. So the build out that they would anticipate here locally would be effectively to double their manufacturing capacity, adding more production areas, new laboratories, a new warehouse, new administrative offices, employee cafeteria, and then a significant amount of new parking. And the city, by the way, did facilitate what they would anticipate in terms of their build out or their site plan with helping to accommodate the parking. We own some land out along 1800 South and are right in the middle. We should be pretty close to finalizing the land swap with them, which gives them contiguous land just adjacent on the south of their existing facility to really accommodate all of the growth that they're anticipating. So the RDA incentive, for a number of years in that Logan River RDA, we've made numerous investments, be it land or infrastructure. Granted, the beneficiaries of that previous assistance are the predecessors to Cytiva, but more recently, as I mentioned, we've helped them with that land swap, and we're going to be locating our power substation at the corner of 1800 North and 10th West, and we're putting in, I think Mark Montgomery said about $2 million investment, which 1/4 of that power capacity will power Cytiva. And so we are helping them that way. But they've also, Cytiva's reached out to the Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity and are having discussions with them about state incentives. And the state has reached out to us and would like to partner with us to really put a financial cash package in front of them. So what it would look like is $150,000 would come from the Logan River RDA Fund Reserve. conditioned upon, obviously, them completing the build-out, the facilities, getting a certificate of occupancy, and then demonstrating that they've made adequate capital investment that they've, said that they're going to make. So with that, well, I just wanted to mention too that this proposed incentive was brought before the city's Economic Development Committee. Jeannie's a part of that, and that group looked at it and is recommending that you, the RDA board, approve this incentive package for Cytiva. So with that, I'll take any questions you might have.
So what's their timeline for this?
Soon.
Soon.
Yeah, they're ready to go. They're growing, busting at the seams, lots of new business out there. They need to get it built as soon as possible.
And I think that they have, because their parent company has some other locations in the United States and outside of the United States that are also interested in doing that type of expansion. I think there was a desire to keep the homegrown business in Logan if we could. And the request was to help give sort of a small financial nod to the fact that we have been doing some other things with them to help them along. The power station is one. And that we are willing to partner with them to help them grow, help them stay in Logan and grow. No questions?
May I ask mine?
Any other comments? Emotional outbursts? Anything? Okay, we're adjourned.
Good
Thank
job.
We're done 15 minutes before the